You know, I kind of go round and round a little bit here with what to call these segments, because I kind of call them reviews, and they're not necessarily a typical review. I was going to call them book breakdowns, but I don't actually break down the books. I could, but there's enough of that, and that's not necessarily what I want to do. I would just rather have a discussion, or at least feel like I am, or please, in the comments, let's go, let's discuss. But anyway, so I think that's what I'm going to start calling these things, is just discussions. So with all that being said, today I'm going to start with Neuromancer. Let's discuss. All right, so Neuromancer is a 1980 God knows what book. That's terrible. I should look this up. Anyway, Neuromancer is a book from the 1980s, and it is a book that spawned absolutely everything. If you are a fan of cyberpunk, anything cyberpunk, then you basically have to thank Neuromancer for that, including two of my favorite movies from childhood, those being The Matrix and Ghost in the Shell, would not exist if it wasn't for Neuromancer. Also, everybody's favorite dumpster fire, Cyberpunk, would not exist without this book. That being said, was it any good? Or not even was it any good, but what was it? And the best way I could sum up Neuromancer is, I would call it an absolute fever dream of ideas. You could take, and did take, people clearly did take, by the way, those are just three examples that I had on the shelf behind me that I could easily and quickly grab. But there is a literal, innumerable number of other examples I could have given that are just rip-offs, or took their idea straight out of Neuromancer and ran with it, which is what I'm going to actually, at the point I'm getting to, which is a very good point. Anyway, my point is that's just what I happen to have available. There are so many more, countless more examples that I could have given that I just didn't happen to have right here. Actually, I do have Cowboy Bebop down here, and that could, you could make an argument that that was influenced by Neuromancer as well, if you're very generous in your definition of influenced by Neuromancer. Anyway, the point is, if it's cyberpunk, it pretty much stole an idea or was so heavily influenced by this book that it's kind of painful to think about. Now, if you're going to read Neuromancer in 2021, like I did, then you're going to immediately, every step of the way throughout the book, you're going to go, well, I've seen that, seen that, seen that, seen that, seen that, seen that, seen that. And the whole time you're, instead of being like, well, been there, done that, and feeling bored with the concept, every time you're like, seen that, seen that, seen that, it adds something to the experience just because it's making you acutely aware of the fact that the only reason you've seen that is because somebody read this book and then said, you know what, I'm going to make that into a movie. I.e. The Matrix, or Ghost in the Shell, or anything. It's kind of crazy just how influential this book was. That particular part of the experience of reading the book is just phenomenal. I mean, that was like a 10 out of 10 on the scale of just hurt my brain how good it was, and just spot on. He invented the language that we use today. The language didn't exist. Cyberspace, the word, didn't exist before he invented it for this book. And his vision of how certain things would function. Now, granted, we don't plug the internet into the back of our head and jack in Matrix style like they do in the book, but the idea of hacking and the internet and the pervasiveness and just how widespread and how it functions and works, and it connects literally everything. Considering that the internet didn't even exist when this book was written, your head will be spinning the whole time at just how genius this book feels as you go through. So just his ability the future sight that he had in order to predict the future was just absolute next level. I don't even know how to quantify just how impressive that is. And the ideas, like I said, pick one idea, and this book is just, you're stumbling over them. There's so many. And some of them are they feel like just throwaway ideas in his book. Like, here's an idea, but that's not what we're really focused on. We're over here focused on Case and what he's doing in his heist story, which, to be quite honest, we'll get there. We'll get there. There were so many ideas that some of them felt like they were just throwaway ideas, and that's where the other people come in. All of the people down the road, all the years since then that have gone, well, you remember that little throwaway idea inside of Neuromancer that he just didn't expand on? What if we took that nugget and we expanded on it? If we pull on this thread to this thought, where will that lead us? And that ends up being a huge number of properties. So I guess what I'm getting at, the level of genius that it was involved in the writing of it's just gonna utterly blow your mind. Now the writing, now that I have doted on this, because I can't dote on it enough when it comes to those aspects of it, I'm gonna just jump out in front of this one and say the writing style isn't great. I as much as I was reading it and just like, oh my God, this is phenomenal idea-wise, it's not phenomenal as far as a read. For me, in my opinion, you're not gonna feel like, oh, well, this is just a page turner, because it's not. If you are used to just kind of like, let's take Stephen King for example, if you're used to just kind of get into a flow and a rhythm and and you just flowing through the pages there, that isn't this one. Not at all. It is, if you have a certain rhythm to your read, stop it, forget about it, and slow your read to a crawl, because it's that dense. What another author would have taken, 10 pages to tell, he will condense it down to like a page and a half. And if you don't read every freaking word in the sentence, in that one sentence, you may have just missed an entire plot point. It's ridiculous how dense the descriptions are, how dense the sentences are, how just dense. And that, to me, was a minus. Some people might be like, oh, that's amazing. That's just how I like my books. In which case, go grab it. It's amazing. For me, I thought that was a drawback. I would have liked a quicker, I don't know. It was just, sometimes it felt grueling to get through. It was that dense. The visuals of it, his ability to see something and convey to you and then have you see, it was so good. And once again, they were extremely dense, the descriptions, and they were, but once you got it, and so there were times I'd be like, was that really what he just said? And I'd reread a sentence and I'd be like, oh, that's awesome. Let's take almost any description of Molly, and it's just wonderful. From her eyes to anything. You see it, and I know I say this a lot, but when you can, there are broad generalized descriptions, and then there are very specific descriptions, and his are very specific, and it gives you, or you just genuinely feel like you can see it, and that's always a bonus for me. And that was really on point in this book. It was good, but boy, just the slog of getting through it wasn't great. Description's amazing. Molly was a great character. Now, I don't know if this was intentional or if it was not. It feels like it was intentional as you're reading it. So I'm going to assume it was, but I don't know. But Case as a character sucks. He's hollow. His characterization is non-existent. You know, you have your well-rounded characters, and then you have your Case. The most generic throwaway character of all time. He has no personality. He has no anything. He is just the most hollow character I think I've read in a very long time. If you're there for character, Case isn't it. He's just the most generic piece of garbage. He's literally a throwaway character. And I think that Gibson did that on purpose. If he didn't, if he meant to make Case a character that was like relatable or anything, you failed. But like I said, I don't think that was the point. I think it was intentional. I think it was just a means of getting you in. And in that case, it worked perfectly fine. Anyway, that being said, there were some amazing characters in the book, i.e. Molly Millions. I really liked Molly Millions quite a bit. She was fun. The most fascinating for me was Armitage. Only because my brain went places with him I don't know if it was supposed to. Just kind of theorizing when you start to find out things about Armitage. There's a certain part in the book where you start to find out that Armitage isn't Armitage. Armitage is someone else, but he's not. He's kind of had his mind erased, essentially, kind of, and either reworked or replaced. I'm not entirely sure. I think it was supposed to be repurposed by psychiatrists, but my mind kind of took it other places. There's so many ideas flowing throughout this book that you kind of get some wires start to get crossed as you go. Anyway, I had a lot of fun when I wasn't reading the book. Just kind of daydreaming and hypothesizing about what Armitage could be, or how that would work, or how he got there, or what if it was a different scenario entirely that I think is actually a whole lot better, but I won't go into any of that. And then it would kind of give you, oh, well, Armitage isn't Armitage, he's actually Corto, and but then, you know, just the stuff like when you find out that when he's not on a mission, he sits in a corner and stares at a blank wall because his mind doesn't really work, because he's not really a person. His mind is a construct of sorts that really has, if it's not on mission, then it doesn't have a reason to really be doing anything, so he'll just sit there and stare at a blank wall. And you're just like, oh. So then, anyway, he was my favorite just to think about when I wasn't reading the book, just because, like I said, so many possibilities. So Corto, my favorite character, and I don't know if this was supposed to be, was Malcolm. Malcolm. I think it's supposed to be Malcolm, but it could be Malcolm. Anyway, he was the most fun. And I think that was on purpose too, because he's the only one in the entire book with a real personality. You know, like he comes into the book and you're just like, oh, I like this guy. Like right off the bat. You don't even need like 3 pages with the guy before you're like, oh yeah, he's my buddy. And all of this kind of adds up to, seriously, the characterizations, because Molly was so cool and Corto's just the ideas and the in-depth thought that went into his character that in turn led me to put in some way too much thought, and just how much fun Malcolm is, and the second he's on scene you're like, oh, this is great. All tells me that the fact that Case's character was garbage, or at least he didn't have one, has to be on purpose. How do you screw up your main character? Anyway, the read, oh god, I'm going to keep going back to this because I have to stress, this was not a fun read. You're not really enjoying it. You are just trudging through pages as you know, just, oh god. Hold on, let me see if I can get through another sentence here, because the writing style was just so taxing. It was exhausting to read. But the ideas are so good. You get to I just wish it was more fun to read if he had a different style, a better style, a style that was somewhat enjoyable. Because you get to the end and there's ninjas and seriously, like, what in the world is happening here? Because we're at the climax, and, you know, we're going to save somebody, but that person's going to die before we can even get there. So we're just going to go ahead and go over here while this person's simultaneously getting kidnapped, and then we get to this main end goal person, and they're being protected by a ninja, a literal ninja. Like, not like... not like, oh, what we call a ninja in the future. What would a ninja look like in the future? You know, oh, you're some futuristic ninja. No, straight up ninja. Like, we're talking, like, what is happening? What is, oh, in this book? Like, literally, what is happening at this point? Like, we're throwing stars kind of ninja. All right. But anyway, so but that all just lends itself to this is an absolute fever dream of ideas. I wish somebody, a better writer, and I hate to say that, that sounds so mean, but it's true. Take his ideas, take a better writer. They don't have ideas this good. They just don't. His ideas are better. Their writing is better. If you could have put his ideas, which were just so next level, and somebody else's writing style that's next level together, this would have probably been the greatest book ever written, just due to how good his ideas were. But because his writing's so bad. Anyway, that being said, so if I were to give it a rating for ideas, wow, I'd give it a 10 out of 10. Right off the bat. I don't even have to think about it. Just a straight 10 out of 10. But that writing drags it down so much. Case just kind of boo. Because I want to feel something for the main character. I want to either like him. Sometimes I like to hate him. Give me a character I hate. That's fine. And he wasn't any of it. He was literally nothing. So that, unfortunately, is going to drag on it. So, I mean, overall, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 7. Just because that seems fair for something as astoundingly influential as this. Everything good about cyberpunk that came after this came from this. Anyway, but 7 out of 10 just because, like I said, 10 out of 10 on ideas and like 4 out of 10 on enjoyability as you're going through the book, and I'll average it somewhere in the middle there because the 7 feels appropriate. You know, jumping backwards for just a second, and just to say this, because the plot sucks. The plot's garbage. I forgot to bring that up. Just to keep that in mind. It was like a generic heist movie. So, case was generic, and the plot was astoundingly generic. But the ideas that surround it are the best to be had. It was a very polarizing experience, to say the least. I want to praise so much over here, and I just want to dog it so much over here, and just tear it down and be like, no, William, no. But either way, it was a solid 7 out of 10, easy, and go read it. I highly recommend that you read it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.